12 News is your local election headquarters. Now, we continue our Where They Stand series on WPRI.com and our 12 Plus Smart TV app. I'm Ray Bakari. Joining me today is Manny Taveras, who is one of 4 Democrats running in the State Senate District 4 special election this summer. The seat opened up after Senate President Dominic Ruggiero died in April, and the district itself contains all of North Providence and a tiny sliver of Providence. Manny, it's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And for those watching, explain a little bit about yourself and why you're seeking the State Senate seat.
Sure. My name is Manny Taveras, and I'm running for State Senate District 4. I'm running for this seat because I've been a lifelong Rhode Island resident. I'm a product of the public schools. I have 3 kids, plus 2 bonus kids as well, too. Not biologically mine, but I certainly consider an influence in their lives. And I've been watching all the news, all the headlines, and I really want to be a generational hope for all those coming forward and coming after me. People are expressing a lot of concerns with what they're seeing at the state level, at the town level, and at the federal level. And they are ripe and ready to see a new change and a new voice come forward. I've been contemplating politics my entire life. I've been talking about local seats, councilman seats from when I lived in Providence and I was raising my family there, to now moving over to the North Providence side. This is a great opportunity to finally throw my hat in the ring and be that representative voice and be an advocate for these working class families that understand what it's like to go through what I've gone through growing up.
Let's talk some policy. One of the bigger bills that was focused on this legislative session, and just a full disclosure for those watching, we are taping this on what's the last day of this year's legislative session and before the primary. The ban on so-called assault-style weapons. Right now, we're at the point where there's 2 versions. There's that Senate version and the House version. They kind of differentiate on if there should be a ban on manufacturing, buying, and selling and owning, or should there just be a ban on selling, buying and manufacturing, but still being able to own the weapons. Where do you stand on this?
Yeah, I can tell you from personal experience, having 3 kids, gone through the public school system, having 2 more that are in it right now. This is a really, really big heart issue for me. I've been thinking about this as a parent, having experience seeing my kids sort of go through lockdown drills and talk about that experience. It really tugs at my heartstrings, knowing that this is a very real case scenario. And when we look at the facts and we see what's been common in all these shootings, I am in support of the assault weapons ban. I know right now, from where we stand from a legislative perspective, the core issue of not allowing the sale of these assault-style weapons, I think if we can keep that, then we're taking a step in the right direction. If I was in office right now, I would vote to ban the sale of these weapons.
And if the assault-style weapons is considered the biggest piece of legislation, or at least let's say second, because the biggest one is the budget every year, both in terms of price tag and the contents of it. The budget is looking at $14.3 billion as of right now. It's about to pass the Senate. It passed the House previously, based on the time we're taping this. There's always those like built-in deficits and concerns about how the budget balloons from year to year. Right. So if you can give me one thing, because some say cut spending, some say raise taxes on the wealthy, what would you favor to try to fix those budgetary issues we see year to year?
Yeah, I've spent the last 15 years in the healthcare space from a professional capacity, managing budgets and setting goals and making sure we can prioritize smart movements over time. So I'm very familiar with budgets like this, where even though we've done a great job of keeping core services going, there's still room for improvement or room to make investments for things in the future. I give kudos to where the budget stands right now, and I'm very happy that at least we're funding a lot of the core services, whether it's libraries, we're looking at educational aid that still stays in place. Those are really good. I'm happy to see that RIPTA was also included in this. We didn't get to complete the full deficit amount, but we certainly made a significant impact. That's a really important core service. I would have loved to have seen a millionaire's tax. I definitely would have been in support of that. One of the things that's incredible about Senate District 4 and the constituents as I knock door to door is that you're looking at families that have serviced Rhode Island in a capacity of either a union worker, a police officer, a healthcare worker, in a teacher, in a lot of different ways, and they've been in that role for 30 plus years, have retired in that role, but yet they still are concerned about these core services. They're very much concerned about doing the right thing. I would have loved to see millionaire's tax to help sort of patch in on some, in some of these areas, and also the ban on smoking at Bally's would have been a very big thing. That's another thing I consistently hear on the campaign trail. Folks want to do the right thing for all the workers, not just at the convenience of the patrons that are in that place.
Although it's a little bit of a smaller part of the district, Providence is in the district, and Providence is having its own issues with the budget right now that has to pass by July 1st, mainly because there was an unforeseen $15 million expense that stemmed out of a lawsuit that the city had with the school district. So as a result, Mayor Smiley is asking lawmakers to pass a bill that would let the city of Providence increase taxes above that 4% cap, but no higher than 8%. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to do a two-parter. The first one, how would you have voted on that bill?
I would support it. I would support an increase on the tax levy.
And then the second half is because there's a debate about what could the city have done maybe to not get in this situation fiscally. Is there anything the city could have done differently in your opinion?
Right now in this race, I am the only candidate that has experience on both sides, right? From the Providence side, born and raised, and I still own rental property in the Providence side, to now owning a property and living on the North Providence side. This issue is important. And I also believe in paying my fair share and helping folks out. So I would support this. I know that the city is faced with multiple deficits, and the biggest driver in this case is the state ordered and court ordered issue that they have to fill in. But it would have, the other side of this would have been cutting a lot of city services. It would have been cutting a lot of important things for individuals on the Providence side. Even though it's a small sliver, it's still very, very important, and it's important to be the candidate that can speak to both sides and connect, not just with North Providence, but also with the Providence individuals as well.
So kind of get back to the whole point of that question. Is there anything the city could have done differently in terms of their finances to have avoided getting to the point where $15 million out of nowhere caused a tax increase this high?
Yeah, I know there were several examples that were brought up of different ways that they could have managed it. I think where I stand right now, I'm more concerned about what we can't go back and change things. This is an immediate crisis that we're faced with right now in a current moment. I understand why we're doing this, and I think the city will be more accountable in understanding, all these different areas that have been brought up. I know Representative Morales has been very vocal on bringing up a lot of these things. So I think now is the time, even though we can do the immediate fix and making sure that we increase the tax levies, but it is very important that we start to look at all areas to make sure that it's sustainable over time.
And for my final question, this might be up your alley since you come from the healthcare background. The state's facing a big crisis when it comes to healthcare. It's caught the attention of state leaders. Fatima, a hospital that's in this district that the election's happening in, has been affected. Anchor Medical shut down. Community health centers in Providence also shut down. And a big part that folks argue is due to the low Medicaid reimbursement rates. So whether it's that or anything else that lawmakers haven't floated, what does the GA need to do to fix the crisis?
Yeah, this is a multi-level fix. We need to fix this system in its entirety. There are multiple parts to this system from my personal experience in a professional capacity that really impact the care of it all. I think where we should start to focus in, and I'm glad that the budget has some increase in some of the reimbursement rates for a temporary fix, right, from where we're going, and we're going to continue to evaluate it. I would love to see our healthcare system to go more into focusing in on the outcomes-based approach and to keep it very simple without getting into too complex of a detail. Right now, the structure is based off of a fee-based schedule, and doctors are making sure they hit certain number of fees, right? I want them to practice at the top of their license and be able to decide what's right for each individual patient that they have and how they can service them, and have more of an incentive for the outcomes and the number of people that they serve and the communities that they serve and how effectively they do it, rather than trying to worry about making sure that they hit all the right number of services just to keep the lights on. So there are better and smarter ways that we can do this. It's not just continuously increasing the rate. That helps for now. But in order to keep talent here long term, we're going to have to really change the way we look at healthcare and how we prioritize healthcare.
That's all the questions I had, Manny. I appreciate you coming down and giving us your time for this.
Yeah, thank you again for having me, and I hope that during this election we start to make a difference with our voices. So I really encourage everyone to come out and vote and participate. Ray, thank you again for doing this.
Anytime. And thank you for tuning into this edition of Where They Stand. Remember, 12 News is your local election headquarters. We have all the other candidate interviews available on WPRI.com and our 12 Plus Smart TV app. For now, Ray Bakari. 12 News is your local election headquarters. Now we continue our Where They Stand series on WPRI.com and our 12 Plus Smart TV app. I'm Ray Bakari. Joining me today is Stefano Famiglietti, who is one of 4 Democrats running in the State Senate District 4 special election this summer. He's also a North Providence town councilman. This special election was called after the death of Senate President Dominic Ruggiero, who passed away in April, and the district itself contains all of North Providence and a tiny portion of Providence. Stefano, it's good to have you.
Thanks, Ray. Thank you for having me.
So for my first question, can you explain to those watching a little bit about yourself and why you're running for state senate?
Yeah, definitely. So, as you said, Stefano Famiglietti. I'm a councilman in North Providence. I've been on the North Providence Town Council for 6.5 years. I'm a lifelong resident of North Providence, went through the public school system in North Providence very proudly, did me well. I went to the University of Rhode Island, went to Roger Williams University School of Law. I'm licensed to practice law in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. I currently own my own law firm out of Providence, and one thing that I do love is my community, and I'd say that's the primary reason that I got involved in this election. I've done my very best to serve on the town council in North Providence and serve my community. With the unfortunate passing of Senate President Ruggiero, who was very dear to all of us in North Providence and the community, it was important to me to have somebody who has very similar, strong community roots to fill that position. Somebody who's from the community, grew up in the community, and who's been actively involved in the community. And reflecting upon that, I do feel that I'm the most qualified person to fit that role. I would draw upon my community experience, my connections in the community, as well as my governmental experience locally, in order to adequately represent the district and try to fill Senate President Ruggiero's shoes the best I can.
Looking at some policy now and some bills that lawmakers passed this session, because if you were a state senator now, you would have had to cast some crucial votes on these. So the first one, aside from the state budget, arguably one of the biggest bills was the ban on so-called assault-style weapons. Toward the end, there were 2 different versions of the bill being debated. There was the House one that banned possession, selling, buying, and manufacturing of these weapons, certain rifles and shotguns. And then the one that ended up passing this, an amended version, just only banned the buying, selling, and manufacturing and not possession. Where do you stand on that conversation?
Well, at the very outset, I would support common sense gun legislation. Safety is obviously a primary concern for everybody. With that initial iteration of the bill, I did have concerns with, particularly with the broadness of the language, definitional issues, as well as potential constitutional issues. As an attorney, I always keep that in mind because, these are codified constitutional rights, and I think that any legislation that we're dealing with, you have to really be deliberate and take care when you're coming up against constitutional rights. That being said, obviously that second iteration came at the 11th hour of the session. So I really haven't had a chance to really dive deep into that and get through the definitions and see where I stand on that one in particular. However, what I will say is that as a senator, I think that you will find that I will be very deliberate in my approach to any piece of legislation that comes across my desk. That's how I am on the council. I'm very cognizant of the issues. And one thing about me is I'm willing to work with anybody and anybody to try to address the issues at hand. I think that's the best way to serve the population, specifically District 4, which we would represent. But as the community in Rhode Island as a whole, you really have to be deliberate in your consideration of this legislation and to be very collaborative and work with everybody to find the appropriate solution and appropriate balances. So that's really what I'm looking forward to whenever pieces of legislation come across my desk.
So it sounds like you oppose that House version and the Senate version. You don't have a stance on it?
Yeah, I just don't know enough about it. But again, I would be cautious about constitutional rights. I think that we have to be fair across the board. If we value our Constitution, which I do, that includes the Second Amendment, and we need to take care with those issues and be, again, deliberate and make sure that they are constitutionally sound.
And I should bring this up because your stance on the assault-style weapons ban is a little bit different than your three other opponents in the Democratic primary. They all favored the ban. Before any legislation was voted on, there was a resolution that the North Providence Town Council passed, and I believe, if correct me if I'm wrong, you sponsored it, that said that the town opposes it, though it's non-binding.
Correct.
That speaks sound.
Yeah, correct. And again, that's going to that first House iteration version that came out. And those concerns that I expressed were the reasons for that. When you have broad definitional issues and potential constitutional issues from, again, a legal perspective, it could violate the Second Amendment, could violate the Takings Clause of the Constitution. That's going to open up the state to liability as well. So I guess from my approach, rather than do a knee-jerk reaction, I'm very thoughtful in the way that I approach things, and I want to make sure that we get it right, too, while we solve the actual issues. So, again, coming across any legislation, I would be that deliberate and thoughtful and consider everything.
Now, moving on to the state budget, aside from the assault weapons ban, this was the actual biggest bill that passed, both in terms of size and impact on the state. Year to year, Rhode Island usually has these budgetary issues with the built-in deficit, and then there's a lot of conversations around how to fix that, whether it's cutting what some say wasteful spending. Some people say we need to maybe implement a millionaire's tax or get more revenue. I'll keep this question broad. If you can give me one thing you'd favor, what would it be to try to fix the state's budgetary issues?
Well, it's definitely a delicate dance that you have to go through, okay? In general, I'm not in favor of increasing taxes. You mentioned the millionaire's tax. It's something that I would look into, but generally I view it with skepticism because, if you're going to be thoughtful about these processes, you have to understand that for every action that you take, there is a reaction to it. What does that law or increased taxes for those individuals do to our economy? That's something that I'd be concerned about. So one thing that I would like to look at, like I did on the town council, is roll up your sleeves and really dig into the budget. See if there is any areas that you can cut while maintaining these essential services. That's a balance that we do all the time in North Providence, and I'm proud to say that for most of my tenure on the North Providence Town Council, we've avoided tax increases while maintaining the essential services that people do rely upon. So I think that's what we need to do. We need to have somebody in there that's really willing to roll up their sleeves, that has done these types of budget analyses before, and so that's what I would be looking forward to with the state budget. One thing I will say, though, is that I do think this year's past state budget, I will applaud the General Assembly because they did have quite a difficult task ahead of them. And I will give a nod to the Senate in their initiatives to make sure that there were investments in our healthcare system, which, as we all know, is of big concern right now, as well as transportation and education as well. So it's definitely a fine balance and a little bit of a dance that you have to make in going through these budgets to make sure that you're not being overly burdensome to the taxpayers, but making sure you make those appropriate investments where they are especially needed.
I should also know we're taping this post-legislative session and before the primary in July. So now to sticking with the budget, you have your North Providence ties, and that's a big part of the district, but Providence is also in the district, and they have a tricky budget situation, even to the point where Mayor Brett Smiley asked the General Assembly to approve for this only this fiscal year to go above the 4% cap for increase in taxes, but no higher than 8%, and that stemmed from a $15 million expense from a lawsuit with the school district. Two-parter, but starting off with the first part, would you have supported or opposed that bill?
Well, here's what I'll say, okay, not being intimately involved with it. Again, I'm somebody that you don't want to raise taxes on anybody. I don't think anybody really does. So I'm sympathetic with Mayor Smiley and the city council. They were dealt a pretty heavy hand with the lawsuit that you were talking about. Multiple millions of dollars that they have to find in order to invest in the education system. Now, they can't print their way out of that mess. So you have to also be a realist. While you generally need to be averse to tax increases, you have to be a realist. So what I can say is, without getting deep into the actual bill and the language itself, is that as a legislator, what I would do is collaborate with the local officials. Try to give them the tools that they need in order to be successful. Because as a local legislator, I understand the challenges that you have with local municipal budgets. So I would work with them and try to do whatever we can to avoid being overly burdensome on the taxpayers themselves.
And now, Councilman, I can understand that, but just to kind of go back to the original point of the question for those watching at home, it's an up or down vote on legislation.
Correct.
Or you could do the not voting, like going in the hallway and taking the phone call. But how would you have voted?
In that instance, I mean, all indications point to that it was something that was necessary for the city in order to be able to balance their budget. We can't let Providence not balance their budget. So most likely I would have been in support of that given these unique circumstances.
And you mentioned collaborating with fellow policymakers to try and not have that kind of situation. That actually plays in the second part I've been asking all the candidates. Is there another way the city could have dealt with the situation to not need a tax increase above the cap?
Well, I'm not sure that they could do it at that specific time. You know, at that point, you're dealing with the hand that you're dealt at that time. However, going forward, I do think there are ways that the state legislature can help our local municipalities. You know, one thing from being in North Providence and learning a little more about Providence is that you have two very unique communities. North Providence is unique in the sense that it is vastly residential and there's not so much commercial. So that means that the tax burden largely falls on the residential taxpayers. So whenever there is a revenue shortfall, like we're potentially facing with the Fatima Hospital issue, the burden is going to fall on the shoulders of the residential taxpayers. Whereas in other communities that have more of a commercial or manufacturing base, you can spread the tax burden out a little bit more. Providence is in another unique situation with many of their properties being nonprofits and not taxable. So what I would like to do at the state level is give aid to these communities in these unique situations so they avoid these issues in the future. I'd like to really invest in our pilot programs, payment in lieu of taxes. That would help both municipalities given these unique situations because particularly in North Providence, any small revenue shortfall is directly going to impact our residential tax base, and we have nowhere to spread it out.
And then for my final question, speaking of Fatima, I'll also keep this broad because the topic of the healthcare crisis our state is facing is multifaceted, and there's a lot of solutions being presented. And to go a little bit more on what the healthcare crisis that we're facing is, you're seeing issues like what Fatima is facing, Anchor Medical shutting down, community health centers in Providence closing. And it boils down to, a lot of people say that want to take on this issue say we need to increase Medicaid reimbursement rates. That's the main solution we're hearing. In your opinion, what does the legislature need to do to address the healthcare crisis?
Well, I'll applaud the legislature. They did make those investments in higher Medicaid reimbursements for primary care physicians. It's extremely important. We have primary care physicians that are leaving the state. We're also happy that they were able to make their investments in hospitals and nursing homes as well. We need to make sure that we're competitive with the surrounding areas because if we lose our workforce, we're in some serious trouble. If we were to lose Fatima Hospital or Roger Williams Hospital, I'm not sure our state healthcare system would be able to sustain that increased burden. So we do need to make those specific investments from a legislative point of view and a budgetary point of view. So I applaud them for doing it. It's a step in the right direction, and we need to keep monitoring it and work with our healthcare partners, whether they be nurses, doctors, to see what they need. How can our state government help them maintain their competitive edge in their local region and make sure that our hospitals, doctors' offices, facilities are staffed? Because at the end of the day, any shortfall in the workforce is going to directly impact patient care. Patients will not be going to doctor's office because they're not there or because they're going to be concerned about long wait times. We can't have that. That's a recipe for disaster.
That's all the questions I have. Councilman, I want to thank you for coming down here,
you.
And I appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching this edition of Where They Stand. Remember, 12 News is your local election headquarters. We have all the other candidate interviews available on WPRI.com and our 12 Plus Smart TV app. For now, Ray Bakari, 12 News.